Well, great guest today. By the way, we're back from our vacation. It was a wonderful trip. We are jet lagged and almost missed the show today because we don't know what time zone we're in. But I'm very privileged to have Sabine Hazan here. She is everything shit. We're going to talk about Let's Talk Shit with her book and her podcast. And we're going to talk about, amongst other things, bifidobacteria. And we'll talk a little bit about vaccines and about COVID and the impact it has had on our microbiome. Then Ian Miller, writer for Outkick, focusing on science and sports. His book is Illusion of Control, COVID-19 and the Collapse of Expertise, and Unmasked, the global failure of COVID mask mandates. We'll get to both of them right after this.
Our laws, as it pertains to substances, are draconian and bizarre. The psychopaths start this way. He was an alcoholic because of social media and pornography, PTSD, love addiction, fentanyl and heroin. Ridiculous.
I'm a doctor, for sake. Where the hell do you think I learned that?
I'm just saying, you go to treatment before you kill people. I am a clinician. I observe things about these chemicals. Let's just deal with what's real.
We used to get these calls on Loveline all the time.
Educate adolescents and to prevent and to treat. If you have trouble you can't stop and you want to help stop it, I can help. I got a lot to say. I got a lot more to say.
I recently learned about a great product line formulated using a novel scientific breakthrough. It is called Active Skin Repair, and my whole family uses it and loves it, including our new granddaughter. Actually, her parents were using it for diaper rash and other skin irritations before we learned about it. It's a baby-strength spray made from naturally occurring molecule called HOCl.
The technology was just kind of really mind-blowing to me on how simple, but how effective it was.
HOCl is a non-toxic, clinically proven antimicrobial molecule, been used in hospital for a long time, and it's actually produced by our own immune system. The applications are numerous: wound healing, insect bites, even eczema, rosacea, other inflammatory skin conditions.
What's really cool about it is, again, no toxicity. So you're not using any harsh antiseptics. It's non-cytotoxic. So when you're putting it on, you're killing the bacteria, but you're not hurting any of those healthy cells that your body's producing to actually help heal itself.
Active Skin Repair Spray also comes in a kid versus an adult version. Get yours at drdrew.com/skin repair for 20% off. That again is drdrew.com/skin repair for a 20% discount. I'm excited to bring you a new product, a new supplement, Fatty. I take it. I make Susan take it. My whole family takes it. This comes out of, believe it or not, dolphin research. The Navy maintains a fleet of dolphins, and a brilliant veterinarian recognized that these dolphins sometimes developed a syndrome identical to our Alzheimer's disease. Those dolphins were deficient in a particular fatty acid. She replaced the fatty acid, and they didn't get the Alzheimer's. Humans have the same issue, and we are more deficient in this particular fatty acid than ever before. And a simple replacement of this fatty acid called C15 will help us prevent these syndromes. It's published in a recent journal called Metabolites. It's a new nutritional C15, pentadecanoic acid, it's called. The deficiency that we are developing for C15 creates something called the cellular fragility syndrome. This is the first nutritional deficiency syndrome to be discovered in 75 years and may be affecting us in many ways, and as many as 1 in 3 of us. This is an important breakthrough. Take advantage of it. Go to fatty15.com/Dr. Drew to receive 15% off a 90-day starter kit subscription, or use code Dr. Drew at checkout for that 15% off, or just go to our website, drdrew.com/fatty15. All right, Sabine Hazan, somebody I wanted to speak to on this program for a while. She's a gastroenterologist, researcher, CEO of Progen Biome. I think that's right. So let's bring Sabine in here right now. Sabine, welcome. Good to see you again.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So I want to get the name of your company correct. Is Progen
Biome, because it's from your genes to your biome. Progena.
So tell us what it does, what the company is about.
So we're a research genetic sequencing lab. As you know, during the pandemic, we kind of made our debut by finding COVID in the stools. And then from there, we isolated a bacteria that we believe protects you from COVID or viruses. And then from there, discovered kind of the microbiome. So that's the purpose of the company, is really to research the microbiome and disease. And we have 61 clinical trials going on the microbiome and disease right now.
So, well, let me understand this. So the microbiome followed the company. You didn't found the company because you were already interested in that material.
No, I started the company couple years prior because I was interested in the microbiome. I was seeing something when I was doing fecal transplant, the process of taking stools from healthy donors and putting it into unhealthy with C. diff. And what happened was I was really interested in, I had a case of a patient with Alzheimer's who improved after fecal transplant or intestinal microbiota transplant. And I said, what happened there? What microbe causes Alzheimer's, or what group of microbes or what signature microbiome is involved in Alzheimer's? So rather than just bringing a stool product to market and a pharma product, I was more interested into the microbe itself, the relationship of microbes and how does disease occur. We all know disease begins in the gut, but I just didn't know how and why and which microbes are involved. So I founded Progenibiome with that.
Well, but I want to even step back a little bit from that and say, you may have known that the microbiome was instrumental, but it's not something that is axiomatically accepted by everybody in medicine.
Correct. I knew because I saw something changed with C. diff, right? A patient, my first case was a doctor actually that was dying. And I was the girl that was doing clinical trials for C. diff. So when the clinical trial didn't work and the pharmaceutical product in trial, first of all, vancomycin, Flagyl didn't work. And then I went the clinical trial route. When the clinical trial route didn't work, I was I'm not going to let this guy die, so let me try fecal transplant. Everybody's talking about it. And when I saw the colon completely, with ulcerations and mucus and everything, and then 2 weeks later, the colonic mucosa is completely normal. I said, what did that? How did that happen, right? And so that's basically what got me into asking the question, how did poop change a colon that has a bunch of ulcers to a normal colonic mucosa?
And you've been very focused specifically on the bifidobacteria.
Well, I wasn't focused on the bifidobacteria until COVID, really. Initially, what I saw with C. diff and what was a progression of the research essentially was,
we should probably tell people what C. difficile is and pseudomembranous colitis, and step back and tell them that.
So C. diff is a condition that people have that they come to the doctor with recurring diarrhea, chronic diarrhea, it seems. And if you take the history, they've taken some antibiotics in the past, have gone to the dentist, and then all of a sudden they get diarrhea that nobody can fix. And so C. diff, essentially, the way that we treat C. diff is either antibiotics like Flagyl, vancomycin. And when that doesn't happen, we go into clinical trials. When those didn't work, we would put stools of a healthy donor in the colon, precisely in the cecum of a person, to fix the problem. What we realized is that, especially when we opened Progenibiome, was really that the microbiome was removed, the diversity. These patients lost their diversity. That's why they were having recurrent episodes of C. diff. So what we were doing was we were giving vancomycin, killing diversity around the C. diff, but we were missing C. diff. And then we kept killing with another antibiotic. So it's like having a mosquito in your house and you're taking a machete and you're trying to kill it, but you missed the mosquito, but you've destroyed your house. So that's essentially what we were doing 20 years ago and 15 years ago. And what fecal transplant does is it takes all the stools from the healthy donor, puts it back into the colon. So you're essentially re-giving a diversity to suppress the Clostridium difficile. And that was the big discovery prior to COVID. When COVID came on, I figured, well, I've done clinical trials for pharma. I have a genetic sequencing lab that's looking at the microbiome. We know that at least I knew that to fight a virus, you need strong microbes. And actually, I wrote the book, Let's Talk Shit. In there, there's a mention of bifidobacteria. But it was kind of a hypothesis. It was something that I read in different papers, but it wasn't really concrete until COVID. And what happened was when we found COVID in the stools, we decided to look at the microbiome. And that's when we noticed that every single patient that had severe COVID was lacking this bacteria, bifidobacteria. And bifidobacteria is found in newborns and it's absent in old people. And so does the discovery of bifidobacteria, the implications of bifidobacteria, its functions. And here we are today with my whole, slogan, which is save the BIF, because I'm realizing we're killing more microbes than we can do, so it's crazy.
So how do you know it's not a secondary phenomenon, that the bifidobacteria is not dropping out because somebody's sick?
Oh, absolutely. So you don't. And that's you don't know whether the you don't know whether the loss of bifidobacteria happened because they were sick, they took antibiotics, they got COVID, they got a virus, or the virus created the loss of bifidobacteria, or the person is so stressed about having the virus that the increased acidity in the stomach and the whole digestive tract is all in disarray, which creates the loss of bifidobacteria. So yeah, there's, it's, in medicine, it's never a one thing and we're not sure of anything really. It's all hypothetical.
Right. Do you have a potential mechanism in mind? And have you have any evidence for that?
Yeah, so I'm coming out with a case report, and that's really my case report during the pandemic because I was the guinea pig. And so I kind of followed myself through the pandemic. And what I think happens is that you end up with a loss of bifidobacteria, either because you killed it. So I killed my bifidobacteria during the pandemic. And what I noticed was what I call a bifidobacteria bacteroides gap, essentially. And I feel that the virus penetrates when that gap, what we call leaky gut, is not really defined. And it's really because the microbiome kind of opens up. You've got a loss of bifidobacteria, you've got high bacteroides, which we've come to realize is linked with anxiety. So, when you see that, and you see the signature microbiome, and of course there's other microbes that are disappearing, the virus penetrates. And I'm going to be showing that in my own case where, I've seen, viruses come in and viruses go, and being symptomatic, not being symptomatic, and what it all does. So that's coming, in the future as a case.
So you mentioned the leaky gut syndrome. That's a hot topic in many of the sort of health maintenance, wellness fields. How do we understand that now? And I always, you've already alluded to this, that, just so narratives, just so explanations are never just so in biology and human biology. It's always much more complicated. So what do you make of all that?
Well, the first thing is when I stepped into the microbiome, I realized, wow, there's so many discrepancies, right? So many labs out there, so much non-validation, so much non-reproducibility, right? So the first thing I did was analyze my stools with different labs, and I got different results. Even the same stool sample, different results. So I said, well, how can I understand the microbiome before and after fecal transplant when I improve a disease if I can't even have the same lab validated, verified, and reproducible? And so I created Progenibiome really with that interest. I told my genetic sequencing, my scientist, I was behind the BRCA gene, and I said to him, I want an assay that is valid, verified, and reproducible. So if I test myself today, tomorrow, and I don't change anything, it's still Sabine Hazan. I'm going to be able to recognize my signature microbiome. So that was the first thing, was developing that assay. Once we developed that assay, it became complex because we started realizing, wait a minute, there's no normals. Everybody's different. So how do you compare? How do I compare me to you, for example? You just came back from New York. I just came back from Austin. I ate Mexican food. You ate like whatever. And so, our microbiomes are probably very different, and yet we feel like we're normal, right? So how is there a normal? How do you capture that microbiome that you're not really looking at the food that you ate last night, right? So that was another challenge. Yep. The third challenge was, how do you capture all that data in a bioinformatics pipeline? Because even the bioinformatics pipeline were flawed. And, you would send the result, the sequences to a one pipeline, and you would get, again, different results. So it really is, a methodical analysis of the microbiome. It's really precise. It's really, you have to normalize these samples up to a certain level, and you have to really do the clinical, right? So in other words, well, what did I eat? What did I take? Did I take antibiotics? Was I on medications? And then and then you compare to families, and then you say, okay, well, let me see what the family looks like. Oh, the family seems to have these microbes, and your kid is lacking these microbes that you all have in the family. What happened? Why is the kid autistic and lacking these microbes, for example, right? So that was really, the whole point of Progenibiome was really to validate, to use my experience having done clinical trials for pharmaceutical companies, to now bring pharmaceutical companies to say, listen, you guys have been, putting one product after another, but we're never reaching a cure. Can we be a little bit more precise? Can we see what these drugs are doing? Can we see what, the vaccine's doing? Could we see what antibiotics are doing? Could we see maybe one antibiotic improves bifidobacteria, maybe another doesn't? What does Tamiflu do? What does remdesivir do to the microbiome? So this is basically the path that I want to get us into, to develop these markers and to say, look, this is what autoimmune process looks like. This is what leaky gut looks like, right? So if you look at the data, and to get back to your question on leaky gut, it's exactly, you wouldn't know from the literature, because unfortunately 90% of the literature out there, and I read it all day long, it's flawed. I can't reproduce it. If I can't reproduce it, it's not valid. So if somebody writes a paper on, well, this microbe is Parkinson's, and I'm looking at my 50 patients that I've analyzed that have Parkinson's, and I don't find this microbe, we have a problem. So
yes. So what is the average person? Let's back up to sort of a hilltop view. What does the average person need to understand about this, or perhaps do, both in terms of healthy people, and I know a lot of people are worried about post-vax, post-COVID, those sorts of syndromes?
Well, the first thing I would say is calm down, de-stress. We don't have all the data right now. There's hope in the horizon. However, beware. And, Scott Jackson at the National Institute of Standards, who's going to be hopefully working with me in the future, says a beautiful sentence, which is customer beware. And I think the customer needs to beware that these stool samples that they're doing out there are just not there yet. And here's the other problem when you see Bacteroides vulgaris. What does that mean? Don't panic and think you need to kill things. I see so many things on social media and influencers that are saying, kill the parasites, kill the parasites. I'm a gastroenterologist. I look for parasites all day long. If I don't see a parasite, I'm not going to give a patient a cleanse, because here's the thing, the cleanse will kill the parasite that you may have, but it will kill your microbiome as well. And good luck bringing back your microbiome when you don't even know what it looks like or what it looked like, right? Because it's like a broken glass that you have no idea what it looked like. You're trying to rebuild it. So beware. And there is research. We're coming out with a lot of exciting things, a lot of exciting therapeutics in the microbiome space with autism, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, hopefully. And but in the meantime, calm down. Make sure you're taking good vitamins. You're going into the sun. You're hiking. You're eating real food. You're making sure you know where your food's coming from, your farm, your beef. I like regenerative beef myself, etc. If you're vegan and vegan does great for your gut, stick to it. If you're vegetarian and vegetarian is great for your gut, stick to it. If you're carnivore, stick to it. I think the thing that we're noticing about the microbiome is we're all different, and we all have different diet needs. I'm from, I was born in Morocco, but I have like, Greek ancestry, Italian. So my diet is more Italian, Mediterranean food. The person that's from China probably needs to like look back at where his ancestors were. Go back to the diet that's comfortable from your ancestors that you feel, doesn't cause you any problems. The moment you start having bloating, gas, that doesn't agree with your gut. So pay attention to that.
Drew, that means you can have chicken soup.
That's about it. So, Caleb, why don't you jump? Because
you could have probably bagel and lox too, right?
Yes, he could.
It's actually true.
He could. No chives.
But it's my brush border seems to have difficulty with alliums now. It's something's gotten way worse as I've aged, which is interesting.
So what we're noticing is the loss of microbes that cause the allergies. It's the loss of microbes that possibly could, and I'm going to say possibly because, in medicine, you can never say that causes, then everybody's going to shoot at me.
Yeah.
But I think possibly celiac sprue is a loss of microbes. Allergies is loss of microbes. I think all of it really begins in the gut.
And I've seen the Parkinson's data. It's rather impressive. I don't know if I was reading your studies or something. I read a couple of papers, and they looked really, really very sort of and reproducible because it was more than one study. But Caleb, you wanted to ask a question about Crohn's disease because you have a personal experience with that.
Hi, Dr. Hazan. So I have Crohn's disease, and it was actually pretty severe. I had to go into the hospital. It was like a whole year-long thing right around the pandemic time where it flared up. Had to get the surgeries, and I'm on Skyrizi now, which is probably like the 4th or 5th medication I've been on in the past 15 years. But I've been seeing stuff, especially from you, that was reposted by a research group that's looking into something called a MAP vaccine for Crohn's disease, which I think it was Dr. Herman Taylor, I believe, before he passed away.
Yes.
His daughter's picking it up. So are you seeing any sort of signs there that there might potentially be a cure for Crohn's disease at some point by researching that bacteria?
Caleb had a psoas abscess. He had all kinds of horrible complications.
The worst.
He really went through it. But go ahead, Dr. Sabine.
So I think because I've done clinical trials, and I've done all these clinical trials for pharma on biologics. And actually, I did the study on MAP, which was a quadruple therapy of antibiotics, hitting really Mycobacteria paratuberculosis. So what we discovered with Crohn's disease was that, or what I discovered, it's not published yet because it was a small study as I was doing the clinical trial, is that there possibly could be 1/3 of people that have Mycobacteria paratuberculosis. 1/3 of people may have a genetic problem, and 1/3 of people may have a gut dysbiosis. My own data actually showed that it was a loss of bifidobacteria so if you look at all the new onset, naive, non-treated Crohn's patients, you'll notice they have 0 bifidobacteria. So when you go to that route and you fix early the loss of bifidobacteria, you may have a chance at restoring it. One of the things that I noticed with bovine immunoglobulins, is that, which is the blood of the cow that's spun around, the clear stuff, is that it actually increases the bifidobacteria. So if we're lucky in the young people, those people, if you catch them early and you give them bovine, you may resolve them. I have one case that I published, was a young man who was started on Humira. The mom didn't want him to be on Humira. We put him on bovine, and right away he went into remission, and I've not seen him in 5 years. And you could see his dysbiosis. Really? He had a lot of Bacteroides, 0 bifidobacteria. As we gave him the bovine, the bifidobacteria went up, the Bacteroides went down. This kid has not seen me. And in fact, the father, who owned a coffee company, talked about it on a show one day about that case. But we published that case. The other thing that we're starting to see is really that correction of bifidobacteria can help these folks. Now, there's a population that you cannot get them, that even if you change the diet, you change everything, they need to be on biologics. Yeah. And then there's a population that the biologics are not working, so there's no genetic component. And those are the people that fit very well with MAP, because you have to ask yourself, did those people have, did they eat beef from a cow that had Mycobacteria paratuberculosis.
Right.
So Mycobacteria paratuberculosis is very similar. It causes in cows a disease called Johne's disease, which is very similar to Crohn's disease. And you see these cows, they're wasted and they're having diarrhea. And basically, if you're unfortunate to have, eaten the meat from that cow, then you may end up having that problem. So is a vaccine the answer? Maybe, but I tend to think that we really need to be more precise. And I think that's where the microbiome is going to help us.
Because what it seems like you're saying is, so at the beginning, it seemed like you divided people amongst 3 different groups. And so some people that might be in my group, I may be almost like too far gone in a way where it's like, well, for me to just keep living and just be able to eat food, then I might need biologics. But I'm also thinking, I've read that it also might be something that's genetic that I might be passing down to my kids. And so what should I be doing with the what is it, bifidobacteria? What was that you mentioned? I forgot the name.
Bifidobacteria is the bacteria, but there is a genetic component to Crohn's disease, right? That's where the biologics are, going after. One important thing about
my
that
question is,
yeah.
Well, yeah. What my question is that, so what could I be doing with what you mentioned? That what should I be doing for like my children in advance?
He wants to protect his kids against developing Crohn's.
Yes,
right, exactly. Yeah. If it is genetic,
So,
what can I do for their gut bacteria so they don't have to go onto these biologics one day?
So you could join a clinical trial. We have a lot of clinical trials where you could join. We have one on Crohn's disease. We can test your kids and we can kind of tell you, look, that we're seeing no bifidobacteria. And that could help your kids with that. The second thing you could do is you could do genetic testing, obviously, to see. But here's the thing. The majority of people with Crohn's disease that we see in our offices do not necessarily transfer to their kids.
That's a relief.
Yeah. So, and I'll tell you that clinical trial that I did, they came to me to enter a trial where they got quadruple therapy, right?
Right.
What I realized after the fact was that, 1/3 responded. And that's how it came out that, maybe 1/3 has MAP, right? Because it's very difficult to isolate Mycobacteria paratuberculosis. And then what happened is the other 1/3 went into having biologics and they were fine on biologics. And then 1/3 ended up developing C. diff. And that's how we discussed, because they were taking antibiotics.
Right.
And so they were on quadruple antibiotic for a long time. So those patients is who we did fecal transplant on. And out of that population, some resolved and some didn't resolve. So then you have to kind of look at, why did some resolve? Did I use the right donor? It happened that, one, if I recall, was taking a lot of nutraceuticals that were the equivalent of antibiotics. There's so many nutraceuticals out there that are killing the gut. And so no matter how much I was giving him a new microbiome of his daughter, he was not resolving the problem. But another one I treated with a brother, and those are the 2 cases that come in my mind, did great and resolved Crohn's disease. So that's how you kind of differentiate.
Right. And sorry, Drew, I'm taking over your show right now, but she's an expert literally in what I have. So this is very interesting to me.
I want to put you together with her soon enough, but I want to step back because I got to get Ian in here in just a second.
Yes. I'll do it.
That's a phrase. Not many people can say that phrase and mean it. But before I let you go, Sabine, I want to step back a little bit and move away from mycobacteria, or rather from gut microbiome for a second, and talk about what has happened to the medical literature and the editorial process of medical literature.
Yes.
I know you were under attack during COVID. And we've seen now things like this guy from Pfizer Speaker Bureau who pled guilty to dozens of research studies that were faulty or fraudulent. This stuff is moving where we're starting to see, and I don't know if you saw the opening video, those of you who were watching before the show started. Again, it was Joseph Fryman talking about how inappropriate the way we do medical research and publication, and particularly FDA approval process, has been. What are your thoughts on that before I let you go?
Absolutely true. I mean, there's so much corruption. Look, the company, the scientists, and the investors, retracted my hypothesis. So when in medicine does a investor of a product get to have any say in what paper gets to stay or gets retracted? Right? Never.
Right.
And when does a PhD scientist go to the editor and say, retract this paper, we found all these problems? Never. It should be my peers. So when my peers who spent their time and basically said, this paper is great, we've looked at everything, put it to publication, and then they go over those peers that are not paid, by the way. None of my colleagues that do peer review are paid. Then you have to say, what's going on? Who's paying these people to retract? There's so much corruption. Listen, I'm going to just tell you one thing. At the beginning of the pandemic, nobody paid attention, but because I've done clinical trials, I paid attention. There was an ad from Madonna, naked, April 4th, 2020. Madonna has donated $1 million to the Bill Gates Foundation for the vaccine. That's already branding people with the vaccine. And then you have an article on The Economist with Bill Gates talking about the future of vaccines, April 26. That should never happen. The vaccines were not even didn't even go through the IRB. Everything you do in clinical trials, you have to get IRB approval. So the IRB hadn't even looked at the protocol, and they're already branding you and influencing the customer or the consumer or the patient with vaccines. That should have never happened. And so, yes, what I saw with Pfizer, I mean, listen, Pfizer's had fines, GSK's had fines. This is how they get caught. They get caught because they do stupid things like that is trying to push a product to market, and they ignored the ICH-GCP guidelines, which clearly states you cannot advertise unless you have IRB approval. You have to have informed consent. Informed consent wasn't processed during the pandemic. Kids were getting vaccinated at CVS.
Still.
But before before the clinical trials were for kids were getting vaccinated at CVS. I know, I saw it in Malibu. The kids were lining up. So nobody gave informed consent to these kids. Nobody told these kids, listen, there's no clinical trials on that
kids,
yet.
To anybody. There's no informed consent to anybody. It was just, there was no risk reward consideration. Francis Collins said it himself out loud.
One of my friends had a pulmonary emboli. She's a photographer, and had a pulmonary emboli shortly after the vaccine. And basically, I said to her, I go, well, what are you taking? She goes, I was on the birth control pill. I go, didn't anybody tell you that you could have a coagulopathy and the vaccines could cause coagulopathy? No informed consent, no history. It's just line up, shot. And that was ridiculous. So there is corruption. And I hope this administration is going to get a handle of that. I hope they bring back science where we can publish again. I'm telling you, I'm gun shy in publishing. I have amazing data on autism. I'm gun shy. I know I'm going to get retracted, or there's going to be problems and emails. So, there's a group of doctors that call themselves the Science Guardian, and they're going after the people that are retracting, and they're looking at all this. So we've assembled, and here's the other thing, Drew, and I know you know this. The problem is doctors don't unite. Doctors, need to come together and talk and say, let's come to the table. And we have to. The pandemic taught us that we need to come to the table and look at both sides of the narrative. I could be right, I could be wrong, but we need to talk about it and not say, this person is full of it, and this person's that. By the way, that's why I wrote the book, Let's Talk Shit. I said, maybe they'll think I'm full of it, or maybe I'll know it, right? But let's talk about it. So that's it.
Yeah, I'd rather even avoid the word narrative and just say evidence. That's all. What's the evidence? What's the theory? What's the hypothesis? And be very specific about how we talk about the materials we review.
Show me.
Sabine, I appreciate. Go ahead, finish your thought.
Show me the data. One of my professors used to say, show me the data.
Exactly. Yeah, that's it.
That's it.
I used to yell at my residents all the time to just show me the publications too.
me the data.
Just give them to me. Show me the publications. I'll look at
Yeah.
them and I'll tell you whether they're relevant to the decision you made. Of course, now I think to myself, I don't know if it's maybe there's some alternative opinions out there that I'm not seeing because it's being repressed by the editorial process. But hopefully, as you said, we can get our handle on that. Sabine, I appreciate you being here. I look forward to this conversation for a long time. You can follow Sabine on X, Sabine, Sabine, Hazan, Hazan, Sabine Hazan, MD, all strung together. And Progenibiome, Progena-Biome, progenibiome.com. Sabine, hope to talk to you again soon. Appreciate you being here.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for your research and work. Now, speaking of one of the reasons I wanted to have Sabine in here first is my next guest is talking about expertise and how it has been so severely undermined. So we're sort of setting you up for that conversation. It is Ian Miller. He is a writer for Outkick. He focuses on science. He's authored Illusion of Control, COVID-19 and the Collapse of Expertise, and Unmasked, the Global Failure of COVID Mask Mandates. He's speaking our language. You can follow Ian on ianmsc.substack.com and also Ian, IANMSC on X. We'll get Ian in here right after this. The Wellness Company knows that taking charge of your family's healthcare is a top priority, and being rationally ready, and who knows what the future will hold for us. Now, TWC has a service to cover your family's medical needs, including and especially prevention. For just $100 a month, the One Wellness Elite membership includes 2 free medical-grade nutraceuticals per month, free prescriptions for over 800 of the most common medications, access to concierge telemedicine, available at a moment's notice, and a 15% discount on all supplements and the emergency kits. 15% off the emergency kits. That's quite a saving. So if you're spending $100 or more on supplements and meds every month, this plan will already save you money. If you sign up for a year, you'll save $200. And when you use the link, drdrew.com/TWC, you'll get 10% off the first payment to the One Wellness Elite membership. Check out One Wellness at drdrew.com/TWC and get 10% off your first payment. drdrew.com/TWC. It's all there. Well, you've heard me praise Paleo Valley's grass-fed finished beef bone broth and the delicious meat sticks. I now want to turn it over to Paleo Valley founder and CEO, Autumn Smith, to tell you about her company's food philosophy.
I'm here to help create the products that make healthy food convenient in our modern world. The diet and the food you're consuming is absolutely related to your digestive health, to your mental health, to every aspect of your health. The devil's in the details here. And not only do we have to attend to every single ingredient, we have to support a system with whole foods. And so when we source a product, it's going to be organic, it's going to be tested for pesticides, and then it's going to be grass-fed and finished or pasture-raised. It's going to be raised on regenerative American farms.
The protein sticks that come in 8 varieties are likewise impeccably sourced and prepared.
And the fermentation process came about because there was an ingredient that I didn't like in meat sticks that's pretty widespread. It's called encapsulated citric acid, and it's derived from GMOs and then hydrogenated oil, and it just melts into the beef stick, and you don't have to label it. That's the thing. You can label it citric acid.
Make 2025 a year to cut out the chemicals and feed yourself correctly. Go to drdrew.com/Paleo Valley for 15% off your first order, 20% off when you subscribe. That is drdrew.com/Paleo Valley.
Ask Dr. Drew.
I have no idea who Dr. Drew is.
He's been watching a lot of Dr. Drew lately.
Dr. Drew.
And before I tell you about our fresh pressed olive oil, I want to remind you that Susan and I were so happy to have packed our Paleo Valley trips for the trip to Europe, especially. We forgot to bring our chocolate bone broth, the protein powder that I love so much and I work with, I eat on a daily basis. But I had the superfood bars, which are made with the Paleo Valley's grass-fed finished beef bone broth. That's the core sort of ingredient in the superfood bars. We love the lemon meringue, which is dense in multiple nutrients. We also had a supply of protein sticks, of course. We had a dog at the airport. We almost didn't get through the agricultural check because the dog noticed our beef sticks through. It was closed beef stick in a luggage, and we had to pull it all out. Yeah, Lucky, the dog named Lucky. Of course, those are made with non-GMO, high in protein, also low in calories. And we love our partners at Paleo Valley. You can go to drdrew.com/Paleo Valley for 15% off your first order, 20% off when you subscribe. Now, I want to tell you about fresh pressed olive oil. We've been thinking a lot about olive oil because we were in Italy, and I'm eating healthier, of course. I love good olive oil, especially Susan. You see Susan's keeps walking past the screen here. And fresh, of course, olive oil packed, it's the most flavor, and it's the healthiest in nutrients when it's fresh from the farm. And that's the problem with supermarket olive oils. They get old, they're not fresh, they can sit on the shelf for many months, they can literally get stale. So I get olive oil direct from small award-winning farms thanks to a fellow named TJ Robinson, who is also known as the olive oil hunter. And believe me, it makes a big difference what you get. When I tasted TJ's Farm Fresh olive oils, I fell in love with their products. They're vibrant, grassy flavors. They're incredibly delicious. Salad, veggies, I use a lot of olive oil. Bread even, we're using a lot of that when we were in Italy. And as an introduction to his fresh pressed olive oil club, TJ will send you a full-size $39 bottle of one of the world's finest artisan olive oils, fresh from a new harvest, for just $1. That is to help him cover the shipping costs. No commitment to buy anything else then or ever. You get your free $39 bottle for just $1 shipping, and you'll get to taste the difference freshness makes. Go to Get Fresh Dr. Drew, Get Fresh DRDREW, getfreshdrdrew.com. That is getfreshdrdrew.com for a free bottle. Just pay that $1 shipping, and getfreshdrdrew.com is where you get it. All right, my next guest is Ian Miller. Again, he's from Outkick. He's a writer, and he has been writing about a lot of the things we've been talking about on this show. Please welcome Ian to the program. Ian, appreciate you being here.
Thanks so much for having me. Really appreciate you having me on.
So I'm guessing as you came to this topic, a lot of what was happening surprised you. I mean, for those of us that are in medicine and in science, it was just shocking and devastating. But I bet to someone who's sort of coming, I think you sort of came at this for the first time, it must have been like bewildering.
Absolutely. I think one of the biggest things that I learned, because I came in this really from a data perspective and got really interested in seeing how the data was panning out with all the restrictions and mandates that we were trying with COVID, was how little evidence-based practice there is in so many of medicine and in a lot of these fields in public health, that they were making decisions seemingly without a lot of evidence or data or facts to back it up. It was just kind of seemed out of a panic and fear and wanting to try something to see if it works. But you can't do that when you're playing with people's lives, as we were during COVID. And so it really was shocking to see how little backing they had for the decisions they were making.
Yeah, no, there was no evidence. These were ideas that were made up on the fly, like 6 feet distancing and all this bullshit. It was completely out of the blue. But it's one thing for them to say, well, we're going to try these things that we have some hunch that maybe they're going to work, but to not contemplate the risk reward of what you're doing. And as I said to Sabine a few minutes ago, Francis Collins has said this out loud. They made no consideration for the adverse impact of what they might have done. And I've said this as long as I've been doing this show now. When I had residents I'd ask them, what's their justification for any particular intervention they did? And if they say to me, well, I had to do something, I would crucify them, because that's how you harm people. You only harm when you don't have evidence or you don't understand what you're doing. And that is what the entire world did. And were you astonished, as I was, that the whole world followed on our shitty ideas?
Yeah, obviously the one kind of exception to that was Sweden. And if you notice, initially they started talking about Sweden a lot, and then it became clear that Sweden was doing much better than the rest of Europe, much better than we were, despite not having mask mandates, despite not doing lockdowns, keeping schools open, on and on. They just kind of stopped talking about it, stopped mentioning it, because it was showing how little evidence they had to support what they were saying. It was the kind of precautionary principle run wild, but in the wrong direction. As you mentioned, like they never gave consideration to the trade-offs of what they were doing. That's medicine 101. And nothing you do, no lever you pull, doesn't also have another reaction to it. And ignoring that caused, as we are now seeing, an incredible amount of harm.
I understand also Bulgaria, I guess, had a very low vaccine update. And guess what? All-cause mortality is down there relative to everybody else. Is that a smoking gun? I don't know. We've got to ask the questions. How about the fact that no one was allowed to ask, no one was allowed to engage in the usual back and forth discourse that is associated with the scientific process? It's still going on, is it not?
Absolutely. And that's the other part of it too, is that they specifically wanted people that disagree with them to be censored, acting as if it was dangerous to say there could be another way to do this. We might not be handling this correctly. And I mean, we've seen the emails of Francis Collins and Fauci saying that we need a swift takedown of the Great Barrington Declaration.
Devastating takedown. Devastating takedown of Jay Bhattacharya, who's now the head of the NIH, which is just poetic. It's Shakespearean, but okay. But what do you imagine, as you kind of look at this and sort of wrote about it and tried to document what happened, what is your sort of perception of what happened? If you were going to sort of tell someone the history of 2020, what happened?
That's a great question. I think I would say that we had a group of very egotistical, controlled or minded experts, quote unquote, and politicians that panicked. They bought into fear. They did not listen to evidence that contradicted their viewpoints. And once it became obvious that what they were trying wasn't working throughout the early middle part of 2020, instead of learning from that, admitting they were wrong, changing course, they doubled down and made things 10 times worse. So it was, I would say it was just a complete waterfall effect of bad ideas leading to bad outcomes, and then having people that were too caught up in their own egomaniacal, controlled paranoia that they weren't willing to alter course.
Yeah, it was weird that they were so paranoid and that they were so totalitarian in their instincts. That was, again, shocking. But when you think about someone like Gavin Newsom, who was locking beaches down and filling, any outdoor activities were being essentially literally constructed over. They put sand over the skateboarding pits and things. His panic and fear seemed not to have been that great. He went out with dozens of friends to the French Laundry in a closed space. He doesn't wear a mask at the SoFi Stadium during the Super Bowl. He didn't actually personally seem frightened. He seemed, humbly, to be just doing the opposite of what other President Trump was suggesting at the time. So was there anything of that going on as well? Some were panicked.
I think he was also fighting with Florida. I remember they were saying, why is everything good in Florida?
Well, but again, if DeSantis said something, do the opposite. But was there something weird like that going on as well?
Oh, absolutely. The hypocrisy, I think, is another really important story that's kind of just been forgotten. I mean, you brought Newsom. That's a great example. There was, in the UK, their health minister was having an affair during lockdown and leaving lockdown to go see his mistress. And we had, so many examples. Stacey Abrams, when she went to go visit that school and she was not wearing a mask and all the kids were forced into masks in that school, little kids. And Nancy Pelosi getting her hair done. I mean, there's just a limitless amount of examples of this hypocrisy, and with no kind of acknowledgement. And one of the biggest problems I had was with the media pointing out, well, if they're not that scared, why should we be? Instead, they would just kind of move on or ignore it because they have the same party or whatever. They believed in the greater good. But it was really frustrating to see how little they actually wanted to follow their own mandates and how they've impacted our lives. And they weren't willing to do it themselves. They weren't willing to have any impact on their lives.
Right. The one thing that sort of I walked away from all this experience was this notion that I have now that when alternative ideas are being actively repressed, like really people are being harmed for having an opinion, that's a psyop essentially. Is it not?
I agree. I think it is one of among the many, many inexcusable things that happened during COVID. I think the movement towards, well, you can't have an idea because it can make people unsafe. That's a dangerous concept. I mean, ideas do not make people unsafe, and conversations do not make people unsafe, especially when you're talking about the harms that were caused by the policies that they were enacting. I mean, lockdowns were not harmless policies. School closures were not harmless policies. Mask mandates were not harmless policies. Obviously, vaccine mandates and passports. So, you have to be able to have this conversation.
So many people with school closures and mandate harmed so many people. Do you have a theory in studying what's happened here? Do you have a theory about what happened to the whole public health project of public health? It feels like it became adulterated or sort of distorted in some way that I worry it can't come back from.
I have those exact same concerns, and from speaking to people that worked in there in public health at a very high level throughout the pandemic and starting in 2020, it's a lot of groupthink. They don't really listen to outside opinions. They get very caught up in what their circle of people think. And obviously it's a very kind of left-leaning profession that didn't like Donald Trump and kind of took the position that whatever Donald Trump said or did or thought they were going to take the opposite position, even when he said things that were obviously right, like opening schools. So it's very, I think it's a really disheartening thing that we can't trust them because they're not willing to be honest with us.
I don't know. I just think there's something wrong with there's some in principle, there's something wrong with how they're approaching their work. The work should be about advising physicians and advising community healthcare providers. It shouldn't be to be an authority from on high. Now, Caleb, you keep throwing an Outkick article up there. Is that Ian's article?
Yes.
About, so Pfizer, House panel investigating Pfizer for conduct around COVID vaccine rollout. Tell me about that.
Yeah, so there is a House investigation currently ongoing because there was a scientist that worked in Pfizer, very high up in Pfizer, during the testing for the COVID vaccine in 2020. And he said to his employer that he went to after Pfizer that he had been instructed to delay test results, to take longer conducting the test results because they were concerned that if they released positive results before the 2020 election, that it could influence who people voted for. And I think it's very clear that Pfizer wanted to get Joe Biden into office. They didn't want Donald Trump to be reelected. And they probably, it's allegedly, but it seems like they may have purposely delayed releasing the results so that they would come out after the 2020 election had happened, which is what happened. That's exactly what happened.
It's just, when I really start looking at this all again, I just get crestfallen by it. It's so disappointing. And to think what was motivating them and again, these are the same people that then lied about President Biden's Parkinsonism and cognitive dysfunctions and as well, I don't know what they were hiding about the vice president. We're sort of hearing some of these stories now. And now we're supposed to look at them as heroes for writing books about these periods. It really, unless people really have some sort of, people should be going on apology tours and really proclaiming what they've learned from this instead of anointing themselves as now heroic because they can talk about things that we all knew.
Yeah, and nobody wants to take accountability or accept that they were wrong about this. And for politicians, it makes some sense because, politicians don't like to ever admit that they're wrong about anything. But when you're talking about public health professionals and experts, the only way that you can ever have trust with the public is to be honest and to tell the truth, because people can tell when you're lying and they can tell when you don't know what you're doing. I mean, Anthony Fauci saying, wear anything in front of your face, then wear a cloth mask, and wear 2 cloth masks, then wear an N95 mask, then wear 2 N95 masks. Just on and on.
I want to talk about masking in a second, but yeah, irrational certitude. This is a phrase that Joseph Fryman coined. The appropriate approach to human biology in particular, and biology and science generally, is rational uncertainty. Lack of certainty. We have lack of certainty about everything. I like some of the things that Sabine was saying. She goes, we don't know anything. It's too complicated, but let's try to make some sense of this. And that's rational uncertainty. If you are certain about anything in science, you are being irrational. Einstein wasn't certain. Einstein was wrong in certain respects, and he had mathematics to substantiate what he was theorizing, and he knew he was uncertain about things. It was the best he could do. And yet in biology, it is just like trying to predict the behavior of clouds, as I've always said. But I want to talk about masking, because your masking book, I think, is, if I'm getting this right, is one of the most popular books out there. So, I saw a thread on X today where it was showing stupid shit behavior by celebrities during COVID. And it was all this footage of people taking their phone and doing this while they signed autographs. While they signed autographs, and pictures of them with masks below their nose. Again, the nose is where the virus gets in, everybody, and also where it comes out and can affect people. Let's see what that is. Yeah. Oh yeah, and then people with the double bands around the ear. We knew that the surgical mask didn't work. We knew the cloth didn't work. We knew that if it wasn't tightly fitting around here, you weren't doing anything. And yet, people to this day, when you bring up masking, they'll go, "But 1 million people died. Don't you know that 1 million people died?" Yeah, I know that, and therefore, I don't want you to make it worse by hurting people with dumb ass policies like school closures.
Yeah. And if you go back and look at what Anthony Fauci said on 60 Minutes in February 2020, that's almost exactly what he said, that it could actually make things worse because people will be touching their faces so much to adjust the mask to make it more comfortable. All of a sudden, 2 months later, he changes his mind. And obviously that sets off a whole mess of mandates and policies that lasted for years. And obviously it's still lasting today in some parts of California. So one of my favorite examples briefly is that LA County did a survey in 2021 and found that 95% of people at businesses were complying with the mask mandate, and said in their press release that was why cases were low in Los Angeles. Within 3 or 4 weeks, LA had one of the highest case rates in the world, not just the United States, anywhere on earth, after 95% of people were wearing masks. And they had kept the mask mandate for months afterwards and threatened to bring it back later. Wow. So it's just ridiculous.
No discourse. Nobody going, I wonder why that is. Can we talk about it? Nothing. It just comes off the radar screen. Moving on to the next, frankly, target of mis and disinformation. We're going to start going. It's such a disappointing sort of posture for people to have. To even I'm confused by it as someone who's supposed to understand human motivation a little bit. That. Why people want so much to tell other people how to live. That is an astonishing thing in the United States for me.
Communism.
Well, the reality is, what's interesting to me is I keep hearing from former Russians, formerly under the Soviet system, talking about how they are inoculated against all this BS because they remember what it was like to be they're not in a Soviet system in Russia anymore. It's not the totalitarian that way, and they were inoculated against propaganda because of it, so they didn't fall for so much of this.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I was actually very surprised at how many people did fall for the propaganda that we were sold here. It really is disappointing. I kind of expected better. I thought more people would be standing up for the saying we're not going to wear masks anymore. We're not going to have these mandates anymore, and we're not going to keep kids out of school and things like that. And it didn't really happen to the extent that I hoped that it would. It was very disappointing.
It sort of never happened. It's interesting. In states that didn't start it, it stayed open and free. But states that went down that path could not seem to change course, which is maybe there's a lesson there about sort of totalitarian instincts and hysterias. Once they get loose, they can't be reeled back in. I've said a couple times on this show, I was reading some books about early sort of 1930s Germany, and the word hysteria came up there a couple of times, and I thought, they were hysterical also, and that's why they went so berserk in the direction they went. And of course, everybody thinks they would be the one that would stand up to Hitler and they would stand up to the Nazis, when in fact, you're yelling at your neighbors about not going out and having a barbecue with their family or wearing a mask out of doors. You are the prison guard. You would be the prison guard in Germany. You need to know that about yourself, and you need to check yourself as a result.
Yeah, exactly. And we did the opposite of that. And I think not only did we do the opposite of that, we encouraged people to tell on their neighbors. I mean, Tim Walz in Minnesota, as we all learned during the election, had set up a hotline for people in Minnesota to rat out their neighbors for not complying with COVID mandates.
That's right.
That's what we did. Instead of treating people with honesty and telling the truth, it was let's tell on everybody and, rat on our neighbors.
What kind of feedback are you getting on your books?
Most of it has been very positive. Obviously, you have some people that disagree, but I tried to do a very purposeful job of sticking to data and bringing up the data and showing just here's what it is, here's what happened, making comparisons. This area that's right next to this area, one had a mandate, the other didn't, and the area without a mask mandate did better. Well, how can that be true if what we're hearing from Fauci and the CDC is accurate? Obviously, it can't. And one example may not be enough, but with the book, the goal was to show that there's hundreds of examples over and over again, everywhere you look. And it's not just us. It was in Europe. It was in other parts of the world. And, we never really had those conversations here. And because the media wasn't willing to have them, they just promoted whatever they were told. And so that was the idea, is to kind of go into detail and show we tried all these things. It didn't work, and it didn't work anywhere. There's not a single example that people can point to that said, oh, here's our masks work. And here's why, a chart. So, there's hundreds that show the opposite.
So what do we do with people that still cling to these notions that either they sort of minimize things by saying, well, we just didn't know, we were doing our best, or refuse to acknowledge the data as we now understand it?
It's a really tough question. I think that the only way that you can convince them is to point out, and I do this in the book as well, that pre-COVID, all of our research on pandemics and how to handle them had showed that masks would not work. The UK had their pre-pandemic guidance. The CDC had their pre-pandemic guidance. They both said masks should not be recommended in a pandemic, and they did it anyway. They both said we should have society open with as minimal disruption as possible. Obviously, we didn't do that. So they kind of took all of the planning ahead of time and threw it out and did what they wanted anyway because of panic and fear.
That's right.
So it isn't, well, we didn't, we were doing the best of what we knew at the time. They did this. They planned for 20 plus years for this to happen. And when it happened, they took everything they planned and threw it out because they were too scared.
The only solace maybe, or the only justification I can find for maybe providing some justification for how some people behaved is saying that somebody like Fauci or people in his camp knew that these were dangerous bioweapons because they've been doing this research, and they had fears of perhaps how far this thing would go or the extent of the damage it would have, given what they knew of the virus thus far. Now, of course, they all deny all that, and they stand by the natural source, of the virus, all this nonsense. But I guess that's a possibility, that they were fearful of what it could potentially do, and maybe it didn't fulfill their worst fears. And I guess you could say that about anybody looking at the virus, like they didn't understand it, so it just became this boogeyman that they were afraid of. But they should have been able to get that under control pretty quickly.
Yeah, exactly. That's one of the biggest issues is, okay, I can see that for maybe a few weeks or a couple months, but almost immediately everybody could see. Yeah, everybody could see this was most severely impacting people who were extremely elderly, extremely sick already. Young, healthy people were not affected by this. Children were not affected by this. And they kept it going for years afterwards, years. And that's where it really starts to get out of control. And we, you mentioned it earlier, but it was very hard for areas and countries that turned these policies on to turn them off again, because there was no off-ramp. They didn't have a set path of this is how we end these policies. It just kept going forever and ignoring places like Florida and Sweden that proved them wrong. So
you've written about the failure of expertise, or the lack of Caleb has a question for us about the committee investigating Pfizer delaying the test result. What are you asking there, Caleb? I don't know.
I wanted to know if there was any new information, because I had read your article, and it seems like it covered what's going on, but that seemed quite bizarre that there was an ex-Pfizer employee that was also a scientist that's out there saying this, then retracting it very quickly. But it's out there. It seems very politically motivated. Is that confirmed, or how deep does that go?
Well, from my understanding, the company that the scientist went to work for confirmed to the House panel that is what they were told, that this ex-Pfizer employee specifically stated that he was told by Pfizer to delay the test results, to delay releasing, to kind of slow walk everything to avoid impacting the 2020 election. He says it's not an accident that we released it after the election was over. So, I mean, he's kind of retracting it, but he's retracting it after it became public, and there's potential that it could come back to hurt him a bit. And he apparently asked for a relocation to Canada from his new company. So, I mean, obviously it's very suspicious, and, retracting it now almost adds more weight to it, that it seems like that's exactly what happened. And it does make sense, because Pfizer probably did want to kind of put their thumb on the scale of the 2020 election. And they got what they wanted. And we had boosters and mandates and vaccine mandates. I mean, Biden tried to get every private business in the country to mandate vaccines, or almost everyone. I'm sure Pfizer was very hopeful that that would be the case under a Biden administration, not a Trump administration.
So, and I'm guessing vaccines, that's what I was going to ask you before we got off of the mRNA thing, was I'm guessing that is in your crosshairs now, because you've covered how public health has failed, how the experts failed, how they've undermined their own trustworthiness, then masking, and then you can't avoid the vaccine. That's got to be your next hill to climb, no?
Yeah, and I have written about it a lot. I think it is, we're still learning a lot. And even though we're obviously several years kind of out of the pandemic, there is a lot of research still coming out about it. We're still finding out about long-term effects. We're not going to know really for several years more what the long-term effects thing is from the vaccines. And, if there are long-term effects, I just wrote a story about how scientists did it, including Joseph Ladapo from the Florida Surgeon General, did a comparison of Pfizer's vaccine and Moderna and found that there was a significant increase in all-cause mortality from people that took Pfizer's vaccine in this massive multi-million person sample in Florida.
The thing I keep saying is we know the spike protein is the pathogenic component of the virus. Why in God's name are we not developing vaccines against other components or other aspects of the virus or the whole virus or the nuclear capsid? Why do we continue to push the vaccine that creates the pathogenic protein? I understand in an emergency, it was the target that they wanted to aim at. It made the most sense. And I get it even for a year. But what the hell? You're continuing to push this thing that we know has uncontrolled production in some situations, in some individuals, of the worst part of the virus. And no consideration to develop something else. It's just, I can't believe it. It's one thing to keep it on the market, okay, but to continue to push it and mandate it and keep it on the childhood vaccine schedule, mind-boggling.
Absolutely. I think there's lots and lots of questions that need answers. We'll unfortunately probably never get them. It doesn't seem like there's an appetite to go hard after Pfizer or Moderna for kind of explaining the answers to those questions that you're asking. And I think it really was the mandates were inexcusable, and there was no justification for doing it after we knew they couldn't stop transmission, which was within a couple months, and they kept doing it anyway.
And as I understand, so as long as you're on the childhood vaccine schedules, you have very limited liability, if any. And so we've got to get them off of that schedule if there's going to be any careful examination of what's going on here. Well, Ian, have I missed anything? Is there anything else that you're sort of worried about these days or you're focused on?
Here in California, you see the Bay Area had several counties this fall and into this spring that still had mask mandates in hospitals. So I think it's still really important to have these conversations and continue focusing on it, because there's still a lot of people that refuse to acknowledge what we've learned over the last few years, and this is impacting millions of people, and even now in 2025. I know it's hard to believe, but it still is. So I want to keep talking about it and having these conversations, because that's the only way we ever get people to change.
All right. So also you can read Ian's Substack. It's ianmsc.substack.com. And also follow him on X, ianmsc. What is wait a minute. We've got to find a way to, what's the SC part? Trying to figure out how to remember your handles.
Yeah, it's just Ian M, and then I went to USC in Los Angeles. So Southern California.
Okay.
That was the reference.
So we can't erase the Trojan influence upon you. Got it. And then and let's see where else people to get the book. So read Unmasked. The exact title is Unmasked: the global failure of COVID mask mandates. If you want to learn about masks, I really do want to look at that book more carefully, because I feel like people should be armed with that if they're going to talk about this topic. And then finally, illusion of control, COVID-19 and the collapse of expertise, which there certainly has been. And unless we, I don't know how we set things right, except with sort of a lot of understanding and apologies and people copying or shifting their point of view to the point where we can start to speak honestly about these things and freely about them, without any sort of worry about a backlash, which is anathema to everything that is required for science. But Ian, I appreciate you being here, and I hope we can talk again soon.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. Really appreciate it.
You got it. Appreciate it, Ian Miller. Get those books, please. And we have a very special add-on guest here that we're going to get into here. Even though you see Susan walking past, you see her diving behind me repeatedly. Of course, I know that you can see her walking past the camera. You see her back and her head.
It's the co-host of Calling Out.
As you pretend to be, you should just stand up like that. That looks a little more honest, at least. We have a special guest. We're going to get a report from the P. Diddy trial.
His name is now Sean Combs.
Sean Combs. He's now changing his name back to Sean Combs, not P. Diddy, but the Sean Combs.
They're making, because he's being sued by the feds, the United States. They're making him go by the name he was born with.
I see. So what have you've been down there every day?
But they are calling him P. Diddy, P-E-E, Diddy, after
Hold up your drink.
the recent
We started with shit on this show.
urination.
Now we're going to P? P. Diddy. I see. Urine Diddy.
Did you see that?
I did not yet. I've tried to stay away from this. I told
Is
you
this
this morning.
pee or can I drink this? Okay.
Either way, apparently, according to the trial, whether it is or is not, you can drink it.
This is good.
Emily, tell us about yourself and where can we find
So
you?
I just, I'm Emily. You might have seen me on Calling Out with Susan Pinsky.
She's in the lower third here. You got all your information down there. You see that? Oh, now it's
Thanks,
out.
Caleb.
There you are.
So
where can they find? You can find
You can find me at Instagram and Substack. Emily Knows Everything.
With an IE, Emily.
with an IE.
I'm reporting every day. I'm going to the courthouse in Lower Manhattan for the Sean Combs versus the United States of America. And I'm out of breath because I was running to get here on time because there is so much chaos happening outside the courthouse.
Why?
Because it's like a mental health asylum. And that's where I thrive. If you saw the clips I just posted.
You see Mill?
Not me,
Oh,
but I'm
the
part of
people around
everyone's
you
like,
see
why
me.
do you keep posting the same? I'm like, have you ever thought maybe I'm one of them?
I'm asking.
Today was the third or fourth day of Cassie Ventura's testimony.
Okay.
They finally wrapped it up.
And I saw, was it you or somebody put the judge retracted something or told them to, she said I was basically a sex slave or something.
Basically a sex worker.
Yeah, sex worker. And he was like, don't ignore that. Why did he have her ignore that?
Objection.
Yeah.
Jury, please disregard that last statement.
Why?
Hearsay?
She's saying it about herself.
That's what no one understood.
You were in the courtroom for all this? Yeah. Okay. And so if you were to sort of describe what you've taken away from this experience.
I mean, it's only week 1, day 5.
Only.
It's supposed to be an 8-week trial.
Ugh. It's gonna go on for 8 weeks.
So far, people are very split online. And in the courtroom, every minute, people's ideas change. Like 1 minute, they're like, wow, Diddy's cooked. The next minute, they're saying Cassie's cooked.
Well, why did Cassie get cooked? She's not on trial.
Well, people are forgetting
She's on
this.
the prosecution
Yeah,
side.
they're forgetting that this isn't a trial, Cassie versus Diddy.
Right.
There's like a ton of witnesses.
She's a witness.
Well, she's a victim.
She's also,
I think she's victim 1, and then they have a Jane Doe, but then a lot of the witnesses have been disappearing. So we don't really know we don't know how this is going to go on for 8 weeks.
I don't get it. So one of the things that you and I have spoken about is how it has desensitized, or we seem desensitized to these extreme imagery of depraved sexual acts, right?
Yeah, basically that's what I've taken away from this so far is I feel like I'm just desensitized to hearing about Hollywood sex orgies. It's just like a court full of people, including Diddy's children who are in the, all of the kids.
Wait, how old are they?
The twins are 18. The boys are in their 20s. They're all just sitting there with his mom, just in a row, unfazed, while we're hearing about Diddy allegedly urinating in Cassie Ventura's mouth with a male escort, and they're both double dipping. And then she's choking on the pee, and everyone's just sitting there unfazed. Like it's like just another Tuesday.
So I blame myself.
And it's your fault.
It's my fault. My reason I think it's my fault is I did a show started in the early 80s called Loveline, where our goal was to teach people about the biological consequences of their sexual choices. And then ultimately talk about that. We also start talking about trauma and reenactments and the consequences of disturbed childhood and how that affected our relationships. and how so our choices also affected our psychological and our spiritual well-being. This went off the rails somewhere.
Yeah.
Talking about it freely, I guess, opened the door to this.
Do you think maybe Diddy watched Loveline?
Why?
I think Kanye was on Loveline, wasn't he?
No.
No.
No way.
Okay.
Is your mic on?
People are trying.
You got to stand up right up against it, Susan.
Yeah, I know. I do.
A lot of
There
the
you are.
public's, I think it's weird because we're just sitting there listening to these stories. Apparently, the freak offs that went on between Cassie Ventura and Sean Combs, apparently they would sometimes go on for 4 days at a time. So they were hiring male escorts to come in, and she would have to wear like huge platform heels, and she would have to keep having sex with these escorts. And she said every 5 minutes, he would require her to lather herself and the escort in baby oil because he liked them to glisten and to keep shining. So the baby oil, up until this court case, they said that it was laced with drugs. They thought that's how he got victims high. Cassie Ventura took the stand and said there was no drugs. It was literally just baby oil from the drugstore.
Were other people doing drugs? Or, I mean, was this in a, because it all feels like drug addict behavior.
They are doing drugs.
Everybody's doing drugs.
They
okay.
said that they're
drugs.
They're both addicted to opiates. They were doing cocaine, ketamine, MDMA, everything.
So maybe this is going to be an addiction story. He's going to get out or get somehow some.
That's what the defense
sympathy.
is trying to do.
I remember when he first went into jail, Suge Knight was talking to somebody on the phone and saying that he was probably in detox and he was going to be having a really hard time detoxing.
They talked about the detox.
Do you remember that?
Cassie talked about it today. She said that they both flew to Mexico separately to do some type of detox, but then they both shortly relapsed after.
Is she sober now?
I believe so, and she's remarried.
She's pregnant.
She's pregnant.
Eight and a half months pregnant. We think she's going to be having a baby on the stand.
She's not sober. She's not sober though.
What?
She's not.
Are you allowed to say that?
What?
You allowed to diagnose?
No, I'm allowed to say she's not talking like a sober person.
What do you mean?
She may be not using.
She's not
I'm
in
saying
recovery.
She's using. I'm
How do
saying
you know?
not
You're
in
not at the
recovery.
trial.
I'm just hearing.
Yeah,
all
but
this.
she's not in recovery.
No, she seems
She may not be
sober.
using. 'cause
Not
she's-
using and sober are two different
Okay,
things.
I don't know. Can you explain that?
When people aren't using a substance, they are abstinent. When they're in the program of recovery, they are sober. That's technically the case. So if they're doing 12-step, they have a sponsor, they're working or getting treatment, they're seeing therapists, blah, 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 blah. They're in recovery and sober. If they're just abstinent, they're just abstinent.
I don't know. It was so technical.
It's technical because when people, if they're truly an addict and they're just abstinent, they will go back.
Is it like when you're calling a recovering alcoholic, you have to say the recovering?
That's another technical thing, which is, you're right, you're never not an alcoholic.
Yeah, I don't know if I just know that her husband.
Is she a recovering sex addict? Or just abstinent?
I think that's what the defense is trying to prove, because they're trying to say that she was a willing participant in the freak off. So they're trying to show text messages that would have her say like, "Oh, I can't wait till you put your legs behind. I can't wait."
So the reality is, let's kind of spec. We respect. I don't know anything about this.
I do have my notebook if you guys want real direct quotes.
I'm gonna say, but not without having any direct knowledge of anybody. She, of course, had to be willing on some level. She, of course, was in addiction.
He was her manager. She was signed to his label. So now there's the power hierarchy they're arguing.
That is the point. This is why doctors don't have a relationship with patients and teachers don't have a relationship with students. That the power imbalance is traumatizing and creates problems from the outset.
And the music industry is already hard enough to break through that industry. So dating the head of Bad Boy Records back in the early 2000s is not.
And again, she was just barely an adult, right?
So they met when she was 19, started dating when she was 21, and he was 17 years older than her.
That's crazy. And the question is and this is kind of a legitimate question. To what extent is she responsible for her own actions in this situation?
That's what a lot of men, especially, are arguing online, where women are arguing the the
Well,
I really do feel like it's become a male and female issue online.
Okay, let's talk about it, because so it is truly the case there was a power imbalance, right? And are you saying, as a woman, the power imbalance has more persuasive effect than a man would know? Is that the implication?
No, I'm saying that online, I'm noticing a lot of men.
No. Stay with me. But I get that
it's been a long day.
I get it's a male-female thing online. But I'm saying, do you imagine the women online that are saying this is, she needs to be sympathized with, are sympathizing with her because they feel like, and legitimately, reasonably so, that the power imbalance and the persuasive effects he had over her were more than a man would realize?
That, and if she didn't participate, he would beat her up.
Well,
so there's a domestic violence element too.
I haven't heard much about that.
Have you seen the video at the Intercontinental
No,
Hotel?
I've heard that he beat her up. I haven't heard them.
One time he stomped on her head.
I haven't heard her say I was afraid.
Yeah. He stomped her head in a van.
I was afraid if I didn't engage in these bizarre sexual acts, I would get beaten. I didn't hear her say that.
Wait, hold on.
Because she was afraid he wouldn't love her anymore.
Okay, what's up? Caleb,
wait, Drew, so wait, are you saying, so you haven't seen...
Oh, I can't hear Caleb.
Wait, Drew, you haven't seen the video that was leaked of...
I have.
You have? Okay.
I didn't know saying is I haven't heard her say... yes, she was a victim of domestic violence, yes. But I haven't heard her say... I was fearful that if I didn't do these sexual acts, that would be unleashed on me again.
That was one of the things. That was one of the things she said, and also she was afraid that he wouldn't love her.
I think it's important to remind the audience, especially the podcast listeners, that Drew has been out of the country for the past 12 days.
Yes.
So Drew has actually missed a lot of stuff that you guys have already heard.
God.
So he will.
I've been
caught up
following
on
Emily.
this. Yeah. Because
I'm
Drew is slightly out of date on his information here because Cassie has said some pretty horrific things she's described just in the snippets that I've seen. And
I'm aware of the horrific things, and that's what I'm saying. How is it we live in a world where people can just say these things and the press just report these things?
And we are not.
We're not
phased.
To these things, and
then I go and report these things, and I go viral, and then I'm like, oh, the more crazy the things, and then there's this creator economy at the courthouse now where it's not just press that's getting in. We have TikTokers, YouTubers, everyone's fighting for a spot, and they're trying to make this story more salacious when it's already salacious on its own.
How could it be more salacious? But somebody says you're going to need an exorcist.
100%. Yeah.
We have a question for Emily, though. Waiting for her at home.
Yeah. Okay, Caleb. You got it. Yeah, good.
Yeah,
my question for Emily is some of the stuff that I've been reading about here is that, especially looking at the opening statements from both sides, I noticed that he did a lot of bad things, but it seems like the prosecution is going after something they might not ever be able to get him on, which it seems like they're trying to do a RICO case when they should have tried to go for domestic violence and assault and kidnapping and all of these other crimes. Do you think that that's a bad direction for them to go? Because it just doesn't seem like they're going to get it.
That's what everyone's been saying, and there has been whispers in the courtroom that there were some victims that got cold feet and dropped out before the trial, which is making this seem like they don't have a lot. I know that Diddy's legal team is celebrating in the courtroom
Sean
as
Combs.
I'm dead naming him. He probably wants to be called Love. That was his his latest name before he was arrested. Love. So there's guys outside the courthouse being like
Puff.
Free. I liked Puff Daddy.
Free
that
love.
was my era.
Free love. That's hysterical.
There was a guy that was arrested a free Diddy, but he was a free love protester outside yesterday. I think that the legal team on Diddy's side, they're already acting like they're going to win. They said they're schmoozing with everybody. They've got a strong team. Garagos, Donaldson, Ryan Steele. They have like a powerhouse, and then these prosecutors are so green. So the prosecution, they're like little, it's like, imagine 7 of me's up on the stand. It's like it's all white women. That's why Mark Garagos called them a 6-pack of white women, because they're all like nervous, like, hi, my name is Meredith. And then they're up against these like amazing criminal offenses.
Right. Isn't that Garagos' daughter? Like, isn't that Mark Garagos' daughter up there doing that?
Garagos is the lead.
I read both of those opening statements.
Teeny.
I read the opening statements from both sides.
She had a better opening statement.
I was like, oh, wow, wait a second. I know he did all of these horrible and terrible things, but she's making a lot of sense here that legally you can't, like, they don't have the evidence so far to support going after like a criminal enterprise. It's all of these other list of crimes that they should have gone after instead. And so that's what I'm kind of worried about, is that he may get off.
Well, they say that the witnesses they're about to call up, they're trying to set the stage right now for the RICO. And the witnesses they're about to call to the stand, they're going to start showing like how he was using employees to conspire and to carry out his crimes. Right now, I think they purposely put Cassie on the stand first. People thought she was going to be the strongest testimony. It might be the opposite. And then I just, when I left the courthouse today, when we left, this guy came up to me and he goes, because I left about 20 minutes early to get here, and he goes, things just got really serious. Like, things are about to get really dark.
Tonight?
They just called a new witness to the stand, and apparently she just spilled out some crazy new evidence that I didn't get because I had to get here.
Well, go on your magic.
Geez. Well, see, so
your phone,
there's
your
that's
magic,
my chance to get my.
It's already on TMZ, I'm sure. TMZ's got 3 reporters in there.
My disclaimer is I've been producing this show for the past hour and a half to 2 hours, so I'm not up to date on the past 2 hours. So maybe he has a full-on RICO case against him now. But
I don't need both of you getting mentally ill because you're around this grossness so much.
I'm honestly more mentally ill from the comment section of people being like, okay, I posted a video the other day where I said, it's so weird that I'm just sitting in court and I'm listening to this male escort being like, oh yeah, Cassie said I had the biggest dick she's ever seen. Oh really? Yeah, she loved my dick. And then someone goes, you sound really biased. And I thought, to what? Small dicks? Because I'm not picking a side. And they were, 2 people were trying, one was trying to say I was biased to Cassie and one to Diddy. It's like, I can't say anything without people attacking.
Welcome to social media.
I think that's more damaging to my brain than this trial.
Yeah, I agree. Although I got to say that the fact we need to really examine ourselves culturally in this country, that this is where public figures end up. We talk about it as though it's no big deal. It's a big deal. It's a big deal, and it's depravity, and it's not good for our soul. It really isn't. And I hope people sort of look at it and think about it that way. But my question to you is, where do you imagine this is going to end up? When you're a couple weeks down the line here, what do you imagine we're going to learn? It's not. People wanted it. People were expecting Epstein 2.0.
But
they want Epstein 2.0. I don't think it's that.
They want bigger people to be named, and so far we're not seeing. We're not seeing Ashton Kutcher. We're not seeing Leonardo DiCaprio. We're not seeing Kim Kardashian.
Yeah,
right now, all we're seeing is random male escorts hired on Backgrid or Backpage.
And we're not seeing the Mossad in there, manipulating him or him using other videos of people.
Today, someone in the lunchroom told me she thinks the sheikhs were paying Diddy so that because they don't get to have sex in their country, so they were paying him for the tape. So that's just a conspiracy brewing in the cafeteria.
Why would they pay him to? Why would they come over and participate?
I don't know. This is how crazy the cafeteria got when we were eating chicken fingers. There was conspiracies lingering. I think also like the content creators, it's really dog eat dog. Like everyone's like trying to like outdo each other with the content. It's like this is apparently like allegedly a sex trafficking trial. So why has this become a media circus?
Exactly. And what makes people come and be drawn to it like moths to a flame? Seems unhealthy.
I think it's because we've never seen someone as big as Diddy on a trial. Like, I don't think anyone really cared that much about.
Are you going to go after Kanye?
It's like an OJ trial.
Is the Conway thing?
Well, the funny thing is Lisa Bloom is in the overflow room every day. And if you guys aren't aware, Lisa Bloom is representing Lauren Pishkota, who is the first woman to be filing a sexual assault lawsuit against Kanye. So her and her mother, Gloria Allred, are in the overflow room every day taking notes. No one knows why, but they're there.
And so, and Kanye is still in prison, jail, whatever?
Kanye's never been to jail.
Want me to call Lisa?
So
he's in Spain right now.
So what is his liability?
He's saying free Diddy. He's saying this is a big conspiracy by Diageo. And it's like...
Diageo? Who's that?
It's this company that, I guess Diddy pissed this company off. And a lot of people believe this theory that they want... I don't know, Caleb, Kanye, are you aware?
God bless him. He has... Why
Kanye actually talked to Diddy before the trial. Kanye called Diddy and they spoke on the phone. And then after that, he started going after Cassie on X and was saying that Cassie's extorting Diddy for money and that Cassie was the one that was running the orgies and the sex parties. And now that she took the stand, she admitted that. She said, yeah, I was the one that booked... the orgies under the name, I think it was Jackie Starr. She would use that name, and she was the one booking the male escorts. So
I see.
Whatever Diddy told Kanye is in exactly what they're saying
Well,
at the
God
trial.
bless Kanye. He is sort of clairvoyant in his perceptions of things, right?
No, he just
even,
talked to Diddy.
No, but even when he comes up with ideas that seem outrageous, they end up being like
3 years later.
Yeah, they're close to the truth, if not the truth.
It's like the fly on the wall.
Since when do you like Kanye? Something happened when you went over
No,
to Europe.
I've always felt bad for Kanye actually because he's got his bipolar.
They have a lot of trauma in their
and I could feel the same way for Diddy. If to me the whole Diddy thing just looks like drug addiction to sex addiction, and eventually those things take you to legal trouble or health trouble
or death
or jail or something.
Why do you think it's drug addiction? I mean, they're saying it is, but a lot of people in the courtroom are saying, I didn't think Diddy was a drug user.
It's just drug addict behavior. It's just all drug addict behavior.
Because no one has sex for 4 days in a row unless you're on drugs.
High, yeah.
Correct. And people, as they get into their addictions, need more and more and more and more stimulation. That's just how it works. It's
and the kinks were getting weirder and weirder and weirder.
Yeah.
I must also, because Emily, you probably know what I'm referring to, but again, Dr. Drew has been out of town for about 12 days, and he may not be aware of the latest updates. Kanye West's new song, which we cannot talk about here. I will tell you about it later if you're not aware.
I got it.
Just I'm aware of that, but just because I'm saying he can see things that other people think may not be true, I'm not saying he's okay.
You know about the song?
I do know about
agree.
Why don't you sing it right now?
Yeah. No,
it's the song of the summer.
It's the Hitler song, right?
Yeah.
No. I can't even say
I
that
know,
word
the
with people are so weird
H
about
word song.
these days.
I'm not supposed to say that.
Yeah.
This broadcast has been seized. Bum, 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 bum.
All right.
That's what it's, that's this.
You know, it's funny because when I was showing him the video where you were talking about, where you were talking about Cassie letting him pee in her mouth, and he went, I was like, yeah, that's a thing. He goes, how do you know that? I said, he was just so confounded by it. He didn't know. This is Mr. Loveline. Yes.
You didn't know about that urination kinks?
The descriptions were so over the top that I was like, what? He did what? She consented to it. She allowed him to do what? And why did she do it? There were so many things. I didn't want to repeat them. That I was just like,
not only consented.
How is that arousing to anybody? How would somebody consent to that and then repeatedly do it? It's just like, oh my God,
the male escort said that she's the one that directed him and said, hey, not so much at once. You need to let it out a little at a time, like let it trickle out. Yeah, because I guess the escort was like,
there was weird stuff with semen. There was all kinds of crazy stuff.
That was the video that went viral is when I talked about the semen on the nipples.
Yeah. Okay, thank you for bringing that back.
I mean, right in front of his mother.
It's not, I've heard of many celebrities with urination kinks, and now I'm wondering, are they going to try to get ahead of the narrative and be like, okay, me too, before some girl comes out and outs them? Because I know of 2 right now.
So the whole Me Too movement is going to kind of convert
P2.
P2, right?
Well done.
That's where it has to go, right?
I mean,
we're all desensitized.
Also, though, but like, is it our business to be knowing about like everybody's sex life?
No.
Like, I don't want to know about your guys's.
No, and you're not going to hear about it. But but the world is desensitized, not Drew. It's
that's what bothers
interesting because that's what I mean. I guess Kanye's gonna produce porn and he does weird stuff too. I mean, he's dragging his wife around naked on a red carpet for the Grammys and wondering why his kids are being taken away. Like it's all this stuff that they do for shock value. You know, it's like Howard Stern. Like he would fly through the air with his butt hanging out.
Yeah, but that looks like babies. You know.
Yeah, but
now he promotes vaccines.
We've advanced. Our brains have advanced. Everybody's so desensitized to anything.
Well, porn has made everybody desensitized, but this trial, I think, is waking people up. I think a lot of people like that live maybe in the middle of nowhere, they're like, this is crazy. But I think in Hollywood, people are used to this kind of behavior.
Well, you're saying something rather profound there. You're saying we're desensitized, right? Is that true?
Not all of us. I think some of us are, though. Because when I was sitting there, I was unfazed. And then when I left, people are like, are you okay? And I said, I've heard of defecation kinks. Susan and I have talked about that on her show. Like, feces is worse than urination. Yeah, so I wasn't that fazed.
We talked to, what was her name?
Barbara Adler exposed it at
the Abercrombie.
At the Epstein parties, that the girls that were trying to be Victoria's Secret models would stand on a glass tabletop and quite literally shit while a photographer was underneath collecting blackmail and taking photos. So,
well, let's talk shit has been the
Well, we
theme
talked
of the
about
day.
shit at the beginning of the show. I wish you could have heard it. And we were talking urine and
I mean,
shit.
it's weird. It's also like, why, if this trial ends up being nothing, I'm wondering, like, do you know anything about, like, how does the government sue somebody? Like, do they just get all these people together?
How do they sue
Like, how is
somebody?
it the United States versus Sean Combs? Like, whose idea was it for the government to go after him? Like,
Good. I don't know. You're the reporter.
I know.
You need to find that
I
out.
need to find that out.
Ask Lisa Bloom. She'll tell you.
Maybe.
And she's an old friend of mine.
We have her
You can
phone
tell her
number.
I sent you in to talk to her.
Yeah. She's there every day with Gloria. I mean, they're saying they're not going to make any
Or
assumptions
you can
on
ask
the
Mark
case.
Garagos. He'll tell you.
Yeah, Mark Garagos, I mean, he seems like I saw him the first day of court, but I haven't seen him there any other day. He was in trouble.
People are talking about porn being the desensitizing factor. Do you think that's why we're also desensitized? Maybe that's the issue?
Yeah, I think so. When I was watching it, I was starting to pick videos that were so weird that I ended up reversing it. And then I was watching porn where not only did they all have clothes on, but they even had N95 masks on. So that's a category now. It's like the opposite of nudity. That's a new category.
Porn.
Yeah, so it's like modest porn.
Fully clothed.
Yeah, they're not even doing it. It's so weird.
How's it porn?
I don't know, but it's a category. It's really strange.
I get the
This is
mask
some, like,
porn thing.
Messed up leftist brain bullshit there. That's wow. Like they turn into
Let's
a
get
kink
you-
for
I
them.
didn't
They're
know-
so
I
obsessed with
didn't-
masks.
It was very, well, they were in China.
Yeah.
So like they were wearing N95s before pandemic, but that's
They're
a whole
wearing
other.
surgical masks for colds and things.
I don't know. I just think this trial is weird that there's just all these people just sitting there judging this relationship that happened years ago,
Yeah, how long ago was it? That's kind
a
of
while ago. And her husband is there, who is Diddy's trainer. So she was cheating on Diddy with this guy. And now
Is it
today,
really cheating given
no,
what
he was
having
cheating
her
too.
do?
No, he was cheating. But today the defense was trying to paint her out as a cheater. And they said that they're like, do you remember the night that you were having intercourse with Sean Combs and your now husband FaceTimed you? Did you answer that call? And she was like, no, I don't think so. And then they were like, did you tell him that you were having intercourse with Sean Combs? And she was like, yeah, I think eventually. Like, it's just a humiliating trial. They're both reliving this toxic relationship. And then
Drug addiction.
they're pulling up emails on BlackBerry phones and texts from Blackberries showing old emails where they're like, I love you so much. I love you. I love you so much. Like, they're just showing how in love this couple was. Today they asked.
Which couple? The now husband?
No.
Sean and
Diddy and Cassie.
and
They're
this
like
girl.
showing how in love they were. And then they're like, today she asked, do you still love him? And she was like, I have love for what we had. And it was just like,
What did you have?
I mean, you can tell she still has like,
Who asked Cassie that?
even though the sex was freaky, the way it feels to me is like they had a toxic relationship. And like the only time she said she felt close to him is when they were having sex. Because when you're dating someone that's unavailable and they're hooking up with girls and they're that powerful, the only time you do feel bonded is when you're having sex. Because
Yeah.
once they come, they forget about you. So that's what the feeling I'm getting. And they kept saying that they keep showing like screenshots of Cassie begging for his attention, but how he was always on tour. And like they were, like Garagos said in the opening statement that both of the victims were desperate for his attention.
That's true.
They're trying to paint both. And so far, Cassie's admitted that. She's like, yeah, I wanted
It's
more
true.
time with him.
But it's co-addiction straight across.
And then today they showed an email where it said that we're seduced. Diddy says, you're supposed to be seducing me all day long. And then they were like, so did you do that? And she was like, sometimes. Like it's just very weird.
It's gross and sad.
And then everyone in the courtroom or the overflow room is just discussing their sex life. And they're all kind of, every single woman in there is relating to Cassie. They're remembering the toxic relationship they had in their 20s.
Talk about yours.
My mom told me I'm not allowed to. I posted about it yesterday, and she
That
goes,
was
"Stop
so
comparing
funny,
yourself
though.
to Cassie. Or
That was really funny,
people in
though.
Attica are
So-
going to think
We
you have
all
weird
had a
kinks.
rock star phase, okay?
Yeah.
Let's talk about it. Talk about it more generally. So if women are relating to these horrible addictive relationships that they had
and abusive ones,
which are abusive and they regret, why in the world wouldn't they show some insight into how bad the choices were rather than relating to Cassie as someone who's like, oh, poor thing, she just made some bad. You know what I mean? It seemed to me that they would be much more like, oh, this is a sickness. This is terrible.
Because we're all,
that
means we're all sick.
Yes.
And also women miss I still miss the toxic relationships because that's where the passion is. Like once you get in a stable one, you don't get those highs anymore.
That is
addict behavior.
Sick. That is
there were
sick.
so many girls today talking about that. They're like, they're like, Cassie's a Virgo. They love chaos. You can tell like she's now dating a Pisces. Like they were like looking at our astrology signs.
That is sickness.
Drew's a Virgo too.
He's a September 4th. That's the same birthday as Jay-Z. Can't trust Drew.
That is.
And speaking of Jay-Z, he has not been mentioned. Everyone has been thinking he's going to get mentioned. I don't think Jay-Z is getting mentioned. Same with Justin Bieber.
So people have to understand, this is my point though, that people have to look at that behavior and those choices they made when they were young and disturbed in some way to make develop these sick relationships.
I think it's human.
All of it's human, but you have to kind of look at it and go, well, that is.
When you're young, you don't realize
I understand.
the situation you're in.
18-year-olds are kind of assholes.
I was 21.
But to continue to romanticize it and to look at
all the TV shows that do it. Look at you.
I agree.
Those women are obsessed with Joe. He's killing and the girls still love him.
Who's this?
The new show is number 2 trending on
What
Netflix.
show?
You. On season 5, the whole show is about a sociopath serial killer that makes women fall in love with him, and he just kills everybody. And the sex is just so crazy, and they just love that he's a sociopath. Like most of the shows on TV right now just show about emotionally unavailable men, and then these like toxic relationships. They're glamorized in media, and I don't think it's because of the media. I think it's a human experience.
At the present moment, that's the way our personality structures have moved.
What came first, these shows or?
That's a really good question, but I know I saw it happen in real time when I was working in a psychiatric hospital. I watched all of the character disorders coalesce around a couple of syndromes. We started the 70s and 80s with all kinds of different pathologies. By the end of the 80s, borderline personality disorder. By the end of the 90s, everybody was sociopath, narcissist, borderline. Everybody.
Someone told me that as we've just kind of moved on in time, they've just started creating these disorders just for humans.
No.
Like the book used to have gay in there as a disorder.
I understand that there are you can be critical, but I watched it happen. I was there when it happened.
Because I would argue that people that are boring just label someone borderline because they are so boring.
No.
What's the argument that you would make for that?
That people are borderline are not happy they're borderline. They have very, very serious
So maybe
condition.
people are misdiagnosing people with borderline because now it's like a cool thing.
We're over-labeling.
The same way with autism.
Sure. Same thing with narcissism. Same thing with everything. We're over-labeling for sure.
Nobody really knows what a sociopath is.
Correct. Although you're describing them pretty accurately.
Do you think Diddy's a sociopath?
I think sex and drug addict, you got pretty clearly based on what,
His mother also introduced him to sex early, right?
What does that mean?
Didn't you say something like that?
There's rumors online.
Go ahead, Mike.
There's something online about Diddy saying something about being in Harlem when he was 12 and being exposed to like pornographic material.
Happens a lot. And the average age of exposure now is age 9, I believe.
Which is interesting because Kanye just came out and said that he was giving oral sex to his cousin that was 6 years old after he found pornographic magazines in his mother's closet.
Right. And so pornography, early exposure to pornography is one of the causes of sex addiction.
Then it's like, okay, my uncle and aunt had every single issue of Playboy and
Playboy
in their,
it doesn't have that
in their basement. And me and my brother saw it and we didn't go act out. We were just like,
there's no sex in Playboy.
There was like Hustler too. Wasn't that a bad one?
I think so.
Wasn't that a little more R-rated?
Yeah, but it's not intercourse. Like you're not
right. But I think that Kanye was talking about Hustler or something.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I just think it depends on the person. I think maybe the mental illness was I don't know.
Well,
who knows? He might have said it for
Drew.
attention.
Is what?
Can people develop develop sociopath tendencies just by basically desensitizing themselves on drugs and sex and craziness, like he probably did for a decade or two?
People in addictions of any stripe can function on the level of sociopathy. So they can look like sociopaths. And when you treat the addiction, the sociopathy settles down.
Right.
How do you treat being a sociopath?
It's almost impossible unless it's in the setting of addiction. So with addiction, when I've seen it settle down, it's either they weren't sociopaths to begin with, they were just functioning like a sociopath to get through their addiction, or because in order to survive your addiction, you have to change. That sometimes that's when people change their personality structure.
People born a sociopath, or can it?
There are genetic features, but it's other things that obviously come involved.
Are there benefits of being a sociopath?
Sure, you can use other people, and you can become a lot of captains of industry and things, and very successful people manipulate and use other people to get what they need without really concerns about them. But when it comes to mental disorders, in general, it's about 60% genetics, 40% environment. Almost every single condition. All right, I'm tired. I'm jet lagged. I was in Rome 24 hours.
I'm tired.
Thank you so much for
jetting over here.
Yeah, I appreciate you being here.
There was people. I have to show you guys after. I saw tits outside the courtroom too.
Why?
Because an influencer showed up and was fighting with this other influencer and flashed the entire crowd, and it was normalized. And she started shaking them. You guys can see it on my
Anybody
live.
else concerned out there? I'm concerned. Anybody concerned? I hope.
Can you post that on Instagram?
I actually airdropped her the video, and she said her editor is going to censor out her nipples.
I think you should. You can only put that on X. I don't think
you can put it on X. Instagram won't ban you.
Ugh.
Wow. Yeah, poor Emily. This is a lot.
No, this is fun.
It's fun for you.
Oh, here's what's coming up. Laura Delano, she's written a book called Unshrunk about psychiatric care, about maybe over all the excesses there. Mike Wall, Christy Meyer, Susan's show next Wednesday. Tim Pool.
We're doing a psychic speed dating show on Wednesday.
Coulter, tell them about that on the 21st.
A lot of Maha people.
Yeah, so we have a comedian coming on, and we're going to do a comedian meeting 6 lovely ladies on a psychic speed dating show.
Oh yeah, that'll be my friend John Campanelli. That's going to be very funny.
Is it John? Is that it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Another Virgo.
Hopefully Emily will be
a rational one. Acts more like you than me. Don't worry.
How dare you? We'll be back. Thank you for being here on the special show on Friday. We had a lot of interesting conversation and good guests. And Emily, thank you for coming by and
thanks for having
enlightening us about the goings on downtown. We will be back on Tuesday. We are going to be at 2:00 all week from what I can see here. Wow, Tim Pool on Thursday.
A really packed schedule.
This is an easy week.
She's looking at his calendar.
This is easy week, organized. My dear. This is my week going.
Yes, Drew did
getting back
film
to normal.
Drew filmed Gutfeld today. It will be on tonight at 10 p.m. And he's also on Kennedy's podcast as well.
And
nice.
and Kilmeade's One Nation show. It did three shows.
Jesus.
More today.
All day long.
All right, keep drinking them Celsius. Bye, Caleb.
Emily,
we're going to have dinner.
Emily.
I'll let you guys know. I'll come back when there's like a verdict.
Okay, but I worry. I want you to take care
You're
of
always worried about me.
I want you to take care of your soul. Yes.
You always worry.
I
Even if I'm not at Diddy, you're like, are you okay mentally? No, I'm never okay.
No, not okay mentally. I worry this is going to affect you.
What soul? I don't even have one.
Oh, please. Well, maybe that's why I'm worried about it.
We'll get it back. We'll get some Eddie Love on her. One of my psychics. He'll make her feel better.
Every time I leave here, I do feel good. That's why I agreed to it. I was like, I always leave Drew and Susan's feeling normal.
Oh, good.
All right, Caleb, thank you, and everyone else. We will see you Tuesday at 2:00. And see us all next week. And check out, as I said, Gutfeld tonight is a pretty good show. And we're gonna have dinner, and I'm gonna go to sleep at like 7:30.
It's like 2 a.m. for us right now.
It's literally 2 a.m. All right, thank you very much, everybody. We'll see you Tuesday.
Ta-ta.
Ask Dr. Drew is produced by Caleb Nation and Susan Pinsky. As a reminder, the discussions here are not a substitute for medical care, diagnosis, or treatment. This show is intended for educational and informational purposes only. I am a licensed physician, but I am not a replacement for your personal doctor, and I am not practicing medicine here. Always remember that our understanding of medicine and science is constantly evolving. Though my opinion is based on the information that is available to me today, some of the contents of this show could be outdated in the future. Be sure to check with trusted resources in case any of the information has been updated since this was published. If you or someone you know is in immediate danger, don't call me, call 911. If you're feeling hopeless or suicidal, call the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 800-273-8255. You can find more of my recommended organizations and helpful resources at drdrew.com/help.